Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for participating in our series on marketing. My name is Ken White, and I am the Executive Director for the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce. I typically do a little commercial, but for the sake of time, Eddie, since you only got like 55 minutes, I'm going to cut that short and just say that, Eddie is one of our members. He has been working with the Chamber in our marketing strategies, and we are thankful that he has agreed to present this marketing series for us. It's a six-part series, right, Eddie?
Yeah,
Yeah,
roughly.
yeah. So we're doing 6 sessions on marketing, and Eddie, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, great. So I just want to start by thanking everyone for attending this event. So I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and join us in this conversation on emotional branding. So I also want to thank Mr. Ken White and the rest of our board of directors for making the event possible. So just to introduce myself, my name is Eddie Agassi, and I'm a branding expert and founder of Apricot Branding. So at Apricot Branding, I help small business owners and nonprofits to really clarify their strategy, elevate their brand, and achieve bigger results in their marketing and sales efforts. So I'm really passionate about really like helping, especially small businesses, but Black businesses as well. So I'm really passionate about helping businesses to really achieve their goals. I'm also a blogger. So I've authored roughly up to 40 different articles on brand strategy, brand design, and brand management, as well as consumer insights. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with the Chamber, and I've been looking forward to this event as well. So I hope you've been looking forward to it as well. So let's dive into the presentation. So I'm going to turn on my screen share. Let me see. Share screen. I'll put my information in the chat as well. Let me see. Paste. Okay, share screen. All right, play from start. All right, fantastic. So yeah. All right, so in this presentation, we're going to talk about emotional branding, building a brand that people admire, because it's so crucial to not just sell products and services, but to actually build a legacy and to build a brand that people actually admire. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this presentation is how can we build a brand that people really admire, and how can we really create a more emotional connection with our audience? So let's dive in. So first we need to understand, like, why is emotion so important? Why is emotion so important when building a brand? So I'm going to start with a quote from H. Tiersky. So the single most powerful driver of consumer behavior is emotion. So I'll repeat that. The single most powerful driver of consumer behavior is emotion. So this applies not to only consumers, but also to people in the B2B sector as well. So whether you're trying to sell to consumers or you're trying to sell to businesses, either way, emotion has been proven to be a huge factor because everyone is human and we all think in similar ways. So several studies have been done, and neuroscience has proven that the way people think is that we not only buy, but we also make decisions based on emotion, and then we justify it with logic. So a lot of our decision making is based on how we feel. So a lot of people, they think that they're very logical in their decision making, but a lot of times we're actually more emotional in our decision making. So some people are more emotional than others, but generally speaking, we're more emotional in our decision making. So in order to really connect with our audience, we really need to understand the emotional aspect and how we can really reach them. And also, we know that, like, the way people think is that no one really wants to think too hard. So logical decisions, they tend to take a lot of time. They tend to take a lot of energy, lots of cognitive energy, and lots of effort. And also, when you're trying to make logical decisions, it's really hard to get all the data and all the information that you need to really make that decision. So most people, they would rather make emotional decisions because they're just much easier to make. So emotional decisions tend to be easier for people to make because they don't want to make decisions based on all the facts and the statistics. They just want to make decisions based on how they feel about that person, that brand, and that's part of what really drives them. So it's kind of similar to politics. So when people buy from a brand, it's kind of like they're voting for that brand. So for example, in politics, when people vote for a politician, they're not just voting based on all the details, right? So they're not looking at all the details in that person's policy. They're not looking at all the facts, all the statistics. A lot of times they're just making decisions based on how they feel about that person. So do I feel like I can trust this person? Does this person feel competent? Does this person seem authentic to me? So based on just the impression that they get and what they associate with that candidate, that's what really drives their voting power. So that's the same with brands. So when people buy from a brand, it's kind of like they're voting for that brand. And people, they prefer to make decisions based on emotion because they're much easier for them. So now that we understand like why emotion is so important in decision making, we need to start with a disclaimer. So branding is often seen as being very manipulative, but the truth is emotional branding is it's not just about being manipulative. So it's more about empathy. So really taking the time to really empathize with your customers and really try to understand them at a deeper level. Like, what are some of their emotional needs and pain points? So when you're able to really understand them at a more emotional level, this would allow you to really craft messaging and marketing that's much more compelling. And also, like, emotional branding is more about connecting customers with the brands that make life easier and the brands that make life more interesting, because customers, they get very bored and they have very busy lives, very complex lives. So they may have family, they have work that they probably hate. They probably have like certain jobs. They probably even have their own businesses. So if a brand can really make their lives easier and more interesting, that could be another way to really create a more positive impact in people's lives. So that's what emotional branding is really about. It's about really empathizing with customers to understand their needs, and also just really connecting them with the brands that really fits their lifestyle. So yeah, thirdly, how can we really make it easier for people to make decisions? So like I said earlier, a lot of times our decision making is based on emotions because emotional decisions are much easier to make. So by having a brand that connects with people on a more emotional level, you could make it much easier for them to choose you because you're much more easier for their brain to process, and they can just choose your offer because they feel more positively about you and what you have to offer. So that's what emotional branding is really about. So next, we need to understand, like, what are some examples of emotional drivers and desires that people may have or that customers may have. So when you're really able to understand the emotional drivers, then you can think about, like, what emotional drivers can my brand tap into to really create a more emotional connection with audiences. So my question to you is, what emotional desires does your brand tap into? So here are some examples. So the first example of an emotional desire is the desire for a higher status. The desire for a higher status. So a lot of times, the reason why people buy from a brand is because they want to be perceived as more successful or more affluential. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to look more successful. So this is really popular in the luxury industry or in the real estate industry. So when people are buying these cars and these houses, they're doing it because they want to feel like they're of a higher status. They want to look more successful. And that's what really drives them to make that decision. So they're not really looking at the logical decisions. It's more of an emotional decision that they're making because they want to be elevated to a higher status and feel like they're a person of prestige. Another example of an emotional driver that your brand can tap into is the desire for a sense of belonging. So the desire for a sense of belonging. So this runs really deep into our consciousness as humans. So like, for thousands of years, right, people always wanted to feel like they're part of a tribe. So if your brand is able to really make people feel welcome, like they belong here and that they're part of a community. That could be another way to really create an emotional connection with them. So one example of an industry that taps into this is social media, for example. So when people log into social media, they're doing it because they want to feel connected to everyone else. They want a way to connect with their family and with their friends. So that's what social media really allows them to do. So even when you join a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, you're able to really connect with people that share the same lifestyle, the same interests as you do. So that really helps to make your life more interesting, where you're able to connect with people and feel that sense of belonging. So another example of an emotional driver is the desire to get the best. The desire to get the best. So one misconception that a lot of people have is they think that everyone is just looking for the cheaper option, but that's not true for everyone. So a lot of people, they're not looking for the cheaper option. They're looking for the best option, and they're willing to pay a premium price for that option. So if your brand is able to tap into their desire to get the best, that could be another way to really connect with them. But I need to inform you that this is a really tricky thing to do, because if you're trying to communicate that your brand is the best, you may actually come off as, too cocky or too arrogant. So it has to be done really carefully. So ideally, you're not saying that you're the best, but you want your customers to conclude that you're the best by themselves. So it's not just about what you say, it's what they say. So if you can really get your audience to conclude that your option is the best and the highest quality option, that could be another way to really connect with them, because you're perceived as the best. Another example of an emotional need is the desire to mitigate risk. The desire to mitigate risk. So this is really popular in, for example, the insurance industry. So when people buy insurance, they're doing it because of the fear of the unknown. So they're doing it because they're trying to mitigate risk that could come from having an accident, things like that. So when you're able to understand, like, what are the fears and risks that they're trying to avoid, and when you're able to communicate that through your marketing, you're able to really make it more impactful and really connect with them. So another example of an emotional desire or driver that people have is the desire for more freedom. The desire for more freedom. So freedom can be internal and it can be external. So for example, an example of an internal freedom would be like the freedom to express yourself. So maybe they want more freedom to express themselves, to speak their minds, to speak their truth. So by giving people a platform to speak their minds and to really express themselves, that could be another way to really create that emotional connection. Another example is the desire to travel and explore new places. So this is really popular in the travel industry. So when you're able to really tap into that desire for more freedom, that's another way that you can create that emotional connection with them. Another example is the desire for more control. So maybe your customers, they want more control. They want to feel empowered. So how can your brand really give people a sense of control? So one example of a campaign that did this really well was the Own Your Tomorrow campaign by Charles Schwab. So the Own Your Tomorrow campaign, it really tapped into that desire for more control, because the message was all about having people feel more empowered to take control of their financial future. So yeah, another example of an emotional desire is the desire for more fun and excitement. So a lot of times your customers, they may have really boring lives. So maybe they're looking for more fun, more excitement. So this is really popular in the travel industry and also in maybe amusement parks. So it's all about experiences. So your brand could also create a really fun and exciting experience that really connects with people and keeps them excited. So another example of an emotional desire that's rarely talked about is nostalgia. So nostalgia is rarely talked about, but it's actually a really powerful way to connect with people, especially when you're trying to speak to like older audiences, for example, baby boomers. So a lot of these older audiences, they have past memories that they're missing. they have like things from their past that they missed that they want to bring back. So what do they feel like the world is missing? What are they trying to bring back from the 80s, from the 50s, from the 60s, right? From the 90s. So when you're able to really tap into their desire, that nostalgia, that's another powerful way to really connect with them. So when you look at this list, for example, like, and you think about your brand, which of these emotional drivers and desires does your brand tap into, right? Which of these emotional desires can your brand tap into? And how can you really amplify it so that you can really connect with them at a higher level? So yeah. So the first step in creating that emotional connection is to really understand your customers, right? So by gaining a deeper understanding of your audience, you can create a more emotional connection with them. So first, we need to define our audience. So for example, what's their lifestyle like? How would you describe their lifestyle? So for example, they may be more conservative. They may be very Christian, very religious. Maybe they go to church every day, or maybe you're trying to reach people who are very corporate. They come from that really white collar corporate environment, or maybe you're trying to reach people who are more athletic. So they are people who are more conscious of the environment, or maybe people who like to travel, or people who like to party. Or you could even be trying to reach people who are more introverted. So these are all examples of lifestyles that your customers may have. Another question is like, what brands are they already in love with? So what brands are your customers already in love with? So by understanding the brands that they already like, that would give you an idea of like why do they like these brands? What is it about these brands that really attracts them? It doesn't even have to be a brand. It could be, maybe it's a magazine that they like, maybe it's a blog that they like. So all these things would provide you with insights into how your customers think. And most importantly, like, what are some of your pain points? So it's really crucial to gain a better understanding of your pain points. So there are different types of pain points, but in this presentation, I'm just talking about emotional pain points. So some examples of emotional pain points are maybe they feel scared, or maybe they feel uncertain about their futures, or maybe they feel insecure about the past. So these are all examples of emotional pain points that your brand can alleviate. And also, like, what subliminal emotional needs do they have? So a lot of times they may not even tell you, but when you're able to really empathize with them, you can really understand like what are the needs that lie beneath the surface that they may not be aware of. So it takes like a lot of empathy to really understand your customers. But when you're able to do so, it would allow you to really take your brand to the next level and connect with people on a higher level. So yeah, so here are 5 powerful ways that you can really create a more emotional connection with your customers. Here are 5 ways to create that emotional hook. So the first is through lasting first impressions. So studies have shown that customers, they tend to develop these conclusions and impressions about your brand within milliseconds, like before they're even aware of it. So the first impression that customers have is also really important. This is also called the visceral impression. So it's that wow moment. So for example, when they come across your website, it needs to communicate that they've arrived at the right place and this is what they've been looking for. So like I said, so they immediately begin to develop these emotional responses before they're even aware of it. So a lot of times their subconscious mind has already concluded whether they're going to buy from this brand before they're even aware of it. So my question to you is like, what are the different ways that customers use to come in contact with your brand for the first time? How do they find your brand? Like, is it a website? Is it a video? Is it a billboard? Or do you have a salesperson? So all these things would influence that first impression that they have. So how can we really optimize it so that that first impression is really memorable? Because it's not enough to just be seen. It also has to be memorable. They have to be able to remember it. And emotion is a really powerful way because we remember things that made us feel in a certain way. So my question to you is, how can you create a more impactful first impression? So when people land on your website, when they read your copy, how do you want them to feel within those first few seconds? So yeah, so the next powerful way to really create that emotional connection is through meaningful stories. Meaningful stories. So for example, the way people think is that everyone has a story in their mind. Everyone has a story. So they have certain aspirations, certain goals, they have certain fears. So all these things form a story in the customer's mind. Even when customers come across your brand, it's similar to a story when they search for your brand and when they find your brand for the first time. It's all unfolding in the form of a story. So when people read your marketing collateral, for example, one mistake that a lot of people make is that they make their marketing copy all about them. But the most effective marketing puts the customer at the center of that story. So it's more focused on the customer. So even the photography that you're using, so how can your customers see themselves in the photography that you're using? So design is a really powerful way to really convey that message and tell that story. So my question to you is, are you telling a story that people can relate to? Can they relate to your messaging? Are you using words and concepts that they can really relate to and understand from their own personal lives? And does your brand really address their challenges, their goals, their aspirations? So most people, they're really busy. They have certain goals that they're trying to get to. So when you're able to really align your brand with your goals, that would really put your brand as a priority in their lives. And also, one thing about stories is that they always have a happy ending. So they always have a happy ending. So the part of our brain that makes decisions, that part of our brain always wants to know, like, what's the happy ending? How's their life going to change as a result of using our offer or becoming a loyal advocate to this brand or becoming a customer? How's that going to impact their lives? So what's the before and after? What's the emotional outcome? And how can you really express that through your marketing in a way that people can understand? So yeah. So the next way that you can really create an emotional connection with people is through shared values and beliefs. Shared values and beliefs. So the way people think is that everyone likes to spend time with people who share the same beliefs and values as they do. So this might be seen as divisive, but it's actually the opposite, because it's not about dividing people, it's about figuring out, like, what does everyone have in common? What beliefs do we all share? What beliefs can we all share? Can we all get together around? And when you're able to really understand what that is, that can really translate into powerful messaging. So my question to you is, what are some beliefs that your customers can share? So for example, one example of a brand that does this really well is the brand called Alibaba through their campaign. So you might be familiar with Alibaba, but through their campaign, they have this belief that that they believe in the power of small. So a small business can make a big difference. A small business can make a huge impact. So just a simple statement like that can really amplify your messaging and make your campaign more impactful. Just having a strong belief that people can really resonate with. So my question to you is, does your brand align with the values and beliefs of your customers? And when you're able to really align people with certain values and beliefs, you can really create a tribe around your brand so that people feel welcome, and then they feel happy, they feel proud to become associated, right? And they feel like they're part of a community. So yeah. So the fourth way to really create that emotional connection with people is through self-expressive benefits. Self-expressive benefits. So you might be thinking, like, what's a self-expressive benefit? So let me just clarify by asking this question, like, what does it mean to become your customer? Because customers, they don't just buy products and services, they actually buy the meaning behind it. They buy into the meaning behind it. So if you look at successful brands, one thing that they all have in common is that there is a deeper meaning behind what people are buying. There are certain things that people associate with becoming their customer. So the way customers think is they have like a certain self-image that they're aspiring to have. So, for example, when people drive a Tesla, for example, they are perceived as, they want to be more environmentally conscious. They want to be perceived as more modern, more savvy. So these are all examples of self-expressive benefits. Even a brand like Dove, you're always trying to make women feel better about themselves. Or if you drove a Ferrari, for example, you may be perceived as more successful. So you're not just selling a product or a service, you're also selling the idea that people who buy from your brand, you're perhaps more intelligent, more modern, more good looking, more affluent, more successful. So all these things would really help to boost their self-image and their self-confidence as well, and create that emotional connection with them. So my question is, why should people be proud to become your customer? What does it mean? So when people buy from your brand or when they sign up for your program, what are they saying? And are you really communicating that through your marketing? So it's not just about what you're selling, it's also about how would they be perceived when they buy, when they buy what you're offering or when they become a fan. So how would they be perceived by others if they become your customer? And how can you really express that in a more impactful way? So that's what it's all about. So yeah. So the fifth way to create that emotional connection with people is through memorable experiences. So the future of branding is in the experience. So experiences are omni-channel. It could be online and it can be offline. So like I said earlier, like a lot of your customers, they have really complex lives. They have a lot going on. And a lot of them might even be bored. So like, how can your brand really make their lives easier and more interesting through events? So events are like one of the most underrated forms of marketing, but if done well, you can actually create a more emotional connection with people by having great events that people can really remember. So especially when you're collaborating with brands that they already love. So for example, you may have some great speakers, inspirational speakers to really empower people. You can have great performers to really entertain them. You can have great music, great food. All these things really help to create that memorable experience. So what else does your brand do to make people's lives more interesting? And when you're able to really tap into these memorable experiences, that can be a powerful way to create a more emotional connection with people. So yeah. So here are a couple of examples of brands that are doing a great job of creating that emotional connection through their campaigns. So you might be familiar with this brand, but one thing about Gymshark, one thing that really helped Gymshark to become very successful was because the founder of Gymshark was his own target audience. He was his own target audience. So he had a better idea of what his customers were like and the people who he was trying to target and what they aspired to, the kind of lifestyle that they had. So a key part of Gymshark's success was that they were able to use influencer marketing to allow their target audience to associate their brand with the people and the lifestyle that they already loved. So a lot of their customers, they really aspire to have a more athletic lifestyle. A lot of them were very energetic. They were bodybuilders. So this really influenced their overall strategy to really align your brand with the lifestyle. And they were able to have influencers in that niche to really amplify their messaging. So when you collaborate with people that your customers already like and admire, they could feel the same way about your brand as well. So another example is a recent campaign called United We Sweat. United We Sweat. I don't know if you've heard of it, but one thing about United We Sweat is that it creates a sense of community, right? By really getting people to associate their brand with the overall lifestyle of bodybuilding, of having like that high motivation. So like people who wake up every morning and they jog for miles. So these are people who are highly motivated, very athletic. So they were able to take people who have this lifestyle and they were able to create a sense of community around it. So United We Sweat is all about that community. So together, everyone gets healthier and everyone can really improve their bodies and their lifestyles. So yeah. Another example is Allstate Insurance. So I'm sure you all are familiar with Allstate Insurance, but one thing about Allstate that really stood out was that they were able to take something really serious and complex like insurance, and they were able to get creative and create a sense of community around it. So what they did was they understood the fears of their target audience. They understood what their fears were, and that they were able to create this character called Mayhem right here on the screen. So Mayhem is like a physical embodiment of the fears of their target audience. So they were able to take that fear and create humor around it. So they would have mayhem in like different dangerous scenarios. So maybe there was an explosion, maybe there was an accident. So all these things would really cause people to really rethink their insurance policy and the kind of coverage that they have, so that way they can consider switching to Allstate. So it blends humor with great storytelling. So they were able to really tell stories that people can really relate to and really motivate them to want to rethink their overall insurance policy. So yeah. So here are the key takeaways from this conversation. So we need to really take the time to try to understand our customers on a more emotional level. The first impression that customers have is so crucial. Thirdly, we need to really put our customers at the center of our brand story. So how can we make our messaging all about them? And fourthly, like our brands need to really align with the values of our customers. So when we're able to really achieve that, that can be another powerful way. So what are some beliefs that lie at the heart of your business? And we need to really redefine, like, what does it really mean to become a customer or to become a member? What does it truly mean to become a member or to become your customer or to become your clients? What does it really mean? What statement are they making? And how does becoming your customer impact their self-esteem and how they're perceived? And then the sixth takeaway is that we need to really make our customers' lives more interesting and more memorable. So when we're able to really make their lives more interesting and more memorable, that could be another powerful way to create that emotional connection with them. And the last takeaway is that we need to learn from successful brands in our industries. So what are some past campaigns that were successful? What are some other brands that were successful and why are they successful? So it's not just about copying them, it's about learning from them so that we can really understand our industry and what's working and what's not working. So yeah. So I hope you all enjoyed this presentation, and let's dive into the Q&A. So who would like to go first? Does anyone have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Tanya Pena. As you were talking through, I was trying to think of how I would apply this to my brand and trying to draw my business customers to my company. So I do business to business consulting work. And so I still want to amplify the things that are really important and make sure that I am creating an emotional connection with my potential customers.
Mhm.
But am I thinking about doing that to the person in the organization? Because the challenge is this: there's a person in the business typically that writes the check, that buys, and then there's the one in the company that really I'm going to work most closely with to implement my services. And so, if I think about them, are they different personas? Sometimes, yeah. And so what's the best way for me to create an emotional connection with both of those personas, or should I just focus on one or the other?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So your clients are your customers. Well, it's not necessarily only the person that writes the check. It could also be like the other people who may be involved.
Right.
But like the key decision maker is probably the highest priority. And from what I know, like B2B can be really tricky, but B2B can also be really emotional. So I would say most importantly, you would need to understand like the actual decision maker and like what are they looking for in the decision making, and what are some subliminal needs that they may have, right? So maybe, for example, maybe you're helping them to mitigate risk, maybe you're
Mhm.
helping them to
Right.
achieve a higher status, right, for your company. Maybe you're helping them to achieve more. So all these things can really help to amplify your marketing message so that you can really connect with them as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about mitigating fears and also fun and excitement, to an extent, maybe even get the best. So yeah, okay. All right, cool.
Yeah, it also depends on the industry too.
Right.
Right? So yeah, I would say also consider like other people in your industry. So like emotional branding is also another way to really differentiate your offer from others. So maybe if everyone is making them feel in a certain way, then your brand can make them feel in a way that other people can't. And that can
Mhm.
really help to really differentiate your offer. And we call that like an emotional positioning, because your brand makes people feel in a way that other people don't.
Right. Right. Okay, good. And I feel that that is happening a little bit. So, okay, cool. Thank you.
Great, sure. All right. So who would like to go next?
Eddie, so I'll ask a question. So in creating you the emotional brand, do you kind of pick one of the items, or do you try to do as many as you can? Do you try to perfect one approach, or how does that work?
Yeah, it all depends on what's feasible. So like, if you try to do too much, then you might spread yourself too thin. So it just depends on what's feasible. So like you can focus on just one and be really good at that one thing consistently, or you can choose, like, you can take people on like an emotional roller coaster in which you consider like different emotions and how they tie in with the overall experience that they have. So yeah, it's just a matter of like, what's feasible, and also like, how you would like to approach it. But there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer in that regard, but it will probably be easier to just aim for one or at least top three. Yeah. And like, it's more about quality over quantity. So I would say like focusing on just a few, but going very in depth in that. So
Is it
like,
okay if I unshare your screen?
okay, yeah, sure. Yeah. So like when I talk about emotional branding, right, I'm not talking about just making people feel happy, right? That's really broad. I'm talking about like being more detailed, right? So not just happy, but like maybe they feel like, so it's a much deeper level. So maybe they feel like a higher sense of achievement, that they're now part of a community, that this company understands me better than everybody else, things like that. And maybe like, this brand makes my life more, makes life much easier and more interesting, right? And this brand also collaborate with brands that I already love. So yeah. Mhm. So yeah, does anyone else have any other questions? Or
So has anyone used any of these techniques before? Has anyone had any experience, good or
yeah, I think
negative?
Sandra raised her hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go again if no one else has a question. So thinking about the different mediums, right? Video and social media and things like that. Do you, as you think about you know, establishing those emotional drivers, is there a medium that you think works really well for each of the drivers? Or, what would you recommend folks do?
Mhm,
Again, like I try to use LinkedIn, but I'm not as active as as I'd like to be.
mhm,
And so I'm trying to do, maybe, okay, I'll start to do more video.
mhm,
But on LinkedIn, it feels like, oh, that really belongs on Instagram more so. But now it just feels like all the rules, there are no rules anymore. So I'm just curious as to, in your experience with folks, and not necessarily those that just do B2B, but like, is there a medium that works best for, you know, communicating, helping to mitigate fears? Or is it a social media channel that's best to be working with certain, like B2B versus business to consumer,
mhm.
that sort of thing?
Okay, yeah. So number one, like it all depends on your target audience and how they like to process information. So for example, there's this program that's called there's this program by Randy Fishkin that allows you to find out, like, you can search like different B2B people based on their industry, and then it will actually tell you like, what are your favorite blogs, what are your favorite websites, things like that. And then that will give you a better example of like how they like to like take information. But generally speaking, the best way to create an emotional connection with people through your media channels is by considering the different ways that people process information. So for example, some people are more visual, so they like to look at videos, they like to see, you know, really nice color, nice design. So some people are also like more tactile, so they want to be more interactive, they want to participate, they want to touch and feel. And then some people are more, they're more audio, so they want to be able to listen to something, or maybe they want to read more. So like if you're able to really speak to the different senses, that could be another powerful way. So I would say like leverage as many different senses as you can, right? So if they could feel the brand, if they can hear it, if they could see it. So it all depends on your industry as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have a question, kind of going back to the finding out what my audience reads, listens to, that kind of thing, because I think that could be really helpful for me in certain spaces, but not really sure how I would go about that. So for instance, one of the main things that I do is I speak, write, and work with people who are needing healing in their father-child relationships.
Okay.
And so how do I find out what else those people are into?
Okay.
I know enough about the space experientially, et cetera, to kind of know how to identify them, but I don't, you know, like when I meet them, I know how to identify them, but I don't know how to kind of like find them or find them in some other's public space to know what they're into, what else I could tap into.
Okay, yeah. So like your scenario is different because you're B2C. So you're not selling to businesses. So if you were selling to businesses, then something like SparkToro would allow you to like search people based on your profession, and then it would tell you what they like. But if you're trying to sell to like everyday people, and can you repeat your description of your audience?
My audience are people who have long-term struggles with father-child relationships and how that has impacted the rest of their lives.
Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's about healing. Yeah,
Okay.
healing
Okay.
and hope.
Yeah, so like based on what you're doing, it's like a very emotional thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very emotional thing. So like there are actually programs where you could type in like a keyword, and then it would tell you like, for example, which websites are ranking on the top for that keyword, because the way Google
Okay.
works, it's kind of like voting. So they prioritize websites based on what people of that target audience are looking for, the one with
Okay.
the hits. So that would give you a better example of like the kind of websites that they like to go to.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also just Facebook groups, right? I bet there are lots of Facebook groups where you can gain a better idea of like, you know, how, you know, what they're saying and where they're spending your time. Even like Amazon, like you can find out like, you know, like what kind of books are they reading?
Yeah,
Which,
the book part. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, I don't know if you can hear me, but I had a question. You were talking about using influencers specific to our industries. Any recommendations on aligning and or simply just uh, best means to find ideal influencers specific to our industries and our products?
Okay, yeah. So, you know, every industry like has certain thought leaders, right? So it shouldn't be that hard to find. You know, if you try, because one thing about influencers is that they would always have like a large audience. So it would be very easy to find these people on YouTube, things like that. It's just a matter of searching for the right keywords, right? And seeing the people that's popping up. Mhm.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and also you can even ask your customers or your clients, like, just having a conversation with someone can like give you a lot of insights. Like, just asking them like, what are some of your favorite, it depends on so the question you ask depends on, the situation, your industry, things like that. So some examples will be like, what are some of your favorite blogs or YouTube channels, or where do you go to learn about this and that? So yeah.
So Eddie, when you say, engage influencers, so what role would they play in our marketing?
Okay. Yeah. So you're familiar with influencers, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of like people that your customers are already listening to on YouTube, right? Or on social media. So when you're able to collaborate with these people, right, you could actually get their audience to engage with your brand as well, because you're collaborating with people that they already like, people that they already trust, things like that. And then, it's about being creative. So there are lots of ways you can do it, right? So just by getting an influencer to just wear a logo, that was a really crucial part of Gymshark's success, was that they would just get influencers to wear their logo. So that would get people to perceive their brand as like, more authentic, more credible, because it's been validated by, people in that industry or in that niche. So there are different ways to do it. Like you could, collaborate with them on events, like you could interview them, just have them talk about your brand too, to their audience, things like that. Yeah.
Great. There was a question in the chat, will we make copies of your presentation available? And yes, we will.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Eddie, this is Kelly Dominique. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Okay, sure, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
So I was listening to another presentation the other day, and they talked about having a branding avatar when trying to better understand your customer. I didn't really quite understand what that was. Do you have any insight into?
Okay, yeah, sure. So like there are different words to describe. Personally, I call them personas. So it's more about like, there are different ways to approach it. So like, for example, if you were a larger company, then you would segment your audience based on their different situations, their different needs, their different ages, and then you would market to them separately. So if you were a smaller company, then you would probably have a more narrow audience. So the idea of a persona is just to have just to give an example of like an ideal prospect. So like, for example, if you're developing messaging, you can use it as a reference point. So like you can look at the persona, and then you can use that to think like, will this message fit this target audience, right? Based on their lifestyle, based on their pain points. So just by having a persona, it could also be a great thing to discuss with your marketing team. Like, this is an example of like an ideal prospect, right? And then based on that, we can more properly evaluate our messaging, right? Based on like what would be a better fit. So it's not about targeting one person. It's more about finding out like, what are most of your prospects have in common, or what are the different types of customers that you have, right? And then you would just, create a persona that's just an example that you can discuss during meetings, or that you can use as a reference points when developing your marketing. You know what I mean?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
This is Carolyn Presley Doss. I actually have a question. My industry is a nonprofit services to cancer patients. So I'm thinking of influences. So for example, if I could get in touch with different oncologists and have them support what we're doing as we provide services to these cancer patients, with having out flyers and brochures and things like that in the doctor's office or an oncologist's office that I'm going to assume their patients trust, would that be a form of an influencer to these patients?
Well, it depends. Like when you say influencers, right? When I say influencers, I'm talking about people who are like really well known, right? But so like people like that, it will probably be harder to get them to pass out flyers unless you're able to. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking more of if we had like a stand and they would be willing to, where they have maybe other educational documents or brochures, if they would include ours there, would that be perceived as giving it some credibility because it's the oncologist that they trust, for example?
Yeah, kind of, but there would probably be much better ways to approach it. So
Okay.
yeah, there would probably be
Trying to
like,
think of ways that, how and where we would get influences for something like that.
yeah.
So Eddie, with that being said, so, you said earlier in your presentation, I was gonna cut you down and set up us baby boomers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying influencers like it's so easy, like it's really a common thing. Like, oh, you just kind of contact so and so and they'll wear your brand or do your name. So I'm thinking, is that like more of a millennial approach? Is it as easy as you make it sound that somebody who has like 1 million followers would actually talk to an everyday guy like me about my product?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Influencer marketing is definitely not simple. So it depends on things like maybe your connections, maybe you have certain connections that can get you to these people. That's one way. Another way is if some people, they pay these influencers, right, to help them market their product. So I'd say it boils down to like the connections you have, and also if you have the budget to pay these people to help you market your product. Yeah. So sometimes they just do it for free. So for example, are you familiar with Bevel?
With whom, I'm sorry?
Are you familiar with Bevel?
Yes.
Yeah, the shaving product, right? So like, like one thing that really helped them to amplify their brand was that they were able to get Nas to rap about it in his song, to put it in his song. But like they were actually everyday people, right? So the founder was like an everyday person. He didn't pay Nas, but like Nas just felt like his product was so good that he just felt free to just talk about it, right? Because he was a fan of it. And that really helped them to really gain that exposure. So it's also a matter of luck. So like sometimes your product can just get to the eyes of influencers. Like sometimes even authors, like sometimes they would just give away their books. They would just like mail out free copies of their books. So like maybe people who are people who have a large audience, right? People who are really well known in that, in that niche, in that industry. And like sometimes they might even get lucky, like the person might even endorse their book to their audience, and that would lead to more sales. So it's not easy, but it definitely happens. Yeah.
Now,
I guess
so,
follow. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
well, I was gonna go back. So what C. Doss was referencing earlier, if we don't go the route of influencers, because some of us are, we don't have budgets that could go that route. But what she was describing, i.e., maybe doing some collaborative partnering or marketing to kind of validate
Yeah.
your
Yeah, it doesn't
product.
have to be, yeah, it doesn't have to be like the people who are up there. Like you can't really get Oprah or something to market your product, but it can be smaller influencers, micro influencers, just people who are, they're not up there, but they're pretty credible. You can still reach those people.
Right. So she says, like, if she goes to an oncologist's office, if they're supporting her product, that helps in her messaging. That kind of validates
Yeah.
her product.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it just depends on what's feasible, right? If you can get the biggest names, or if you can just get like people who may have a smaller audience, but they're still pretty credible in that space, right? And so yeah.
Do you have any tips on how to reach these influencers? For example, there is a celebrity who recently spoke out on one of the cancers that I'm even dealing with, and I tried different methods of reaching this individual, and I haven't been successful in that yet. Do you have any tips on how to reach these influencers, especially if they're a celebrity, if you will? Because I know they probably get 1,000 requests every day. So how do you differentiate yourself and somehow get them to respond to you?
Yeah, the higher, the bigger that person is, the harder it would be to reach that person. So, I would just say, just start with like maybe the low hanging fruit. And then over time, you would probably be able to reach bigger people when you like get to a certain level of, credibility. So like one way to really reach those people is so for example, one factor that determines is, if your brand aligns with their message as well. So there has to be like a deep connection between your brand and your message. You know what I'm saying? And then
Right.
you explain to them like how your brand really ties in. Like a lot of these influencers, they have their own shows, they have their own podcasts. and you can just explain to them like, how your brand, especially if you're building a personal brand, like how does your message really tie in with their theme and like, what they're all about, and like how would your audience really benefit? So it's like a numbers game. So you would reach out to like lots of different people, and a fraction of them would respond.
Okay, 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 great, thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask a question that may have value to what she's asking?
Sure.
What do you think it would be helpful to create content around celebrities who identify with her messaging? So if that particular person who's highly visible, share with the world that they are experiencing, or they know someone that has this type of cancer, maybe she can highlight their story in the content that she creates, and then other individuals who have that same sort of situation going on, create content around that so people can see her brand and then see that person who's highly visible that'll, kind of make their antennas go up.
Yeah, that's actually been done before. So like, are you familiar with the Founder magazine? Founder magazine.
No.
So like one key thing that led to the success of their magazine was that they would always try to like, because one thing about celebrities is that they like press. So they're always looking for press. They're always looking for like people who are looking to interview them on their shows. So they would just reach out to these people, right, to like allow them to interview them on their shows. And then, the founder, he was able to get people like Richard Branson all of a sudden. And he was all of a sudden able to get these big names onto his platform. And that really helped to amplify his brand. And that was a key part of his success. So just by, being like acting like a media company and interviewing these people around certain topics, they're more likely to be open to be interviewed because they like that exposure, and you're giving them free exposure. Yeah. So that's been
Eddie, that I agree with, but the problem I'm having is the way to reach them. You go on and you Google their names, and they have these, these different sites that you can go to for fans. And I've went different, for example, I'm trying to reach DL Hughley because in the last month or so, he's actually talking about a cancer that I can relate to, and that's multiple myeloma. And he started this whole project about sign up, make sure you, your family are tested. And I don't know if it's because he is dealing with it personally or someone in his family, but the way he came across is very personal. So
Okay.
I finally found a method I thought of communicating, and I've sent the message and I haven't heard back. So it is a numbers game, but I thought that would speak to him since he now has this movement on this particular cancer. So, other than Googling and trying to find a site or a fan web page or something, how else can you try to reach these people? And I think that's what I'm struggling with, how to actually reach them.
Okay, so the first thing is like you most likely wouldn't reach the celebrity himself, but you can definitely maybe reach like one of the people who work with him. So like,
Okay.
a lot of these people, they have like other like contact information for their office. So
Mhm.
like there's this website called IMDb Pro, in which you can actually find like different movie producers, and then you can get their contact information and like send them a letter. But obviously, like not all of them might respond, but it's still a numbers game.
Right.
Yeah.
And
what
by
did you say
numbers
that
too,
website
it may
is?
not, the numbers may not be how many, but you may have to try several times. You may,
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
and
what
you may have to
I
try
can
like,
definitely do that. Right.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
what did you say that website is? I am what?
IMDb Pro. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it's like a movie website where you can
Okay.
find like the contact info of like different movie producers. And
Okay.
like you can actually reach out to their office, like people like Tyler Perry. You can find it there. Yeah.
Okay, great.
so,
Okay.
so,
But you would have to subscribe, so it's not free, but it's free for like the first month or so. Yeah.
so
If
Kelly's,
if it means reaching them, it would be worth it. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
check out the chat, y'all. There's some good information there. Kelly was saying that DL is very active on Instagram, and somebody just clarified the IMDb Pro. And she suggested that you could either direct message him on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, it also depends on the celebrity, right? Some celebrities are more friendly, they're more down to earth. You can reach them more easily. Then some of them are like impossible to reach. So like it depends on just different factors. Like your brand is also has to really pop. So if your brand doesn't look professional or credible, you're not gonna want to talk to you, right? So your brand also needs to look really, really credible. and then you can reach out to these people. Yeah,
So
Mhm.
Eddie, it's 5:02. I want to be respectful of your time.
sure.
And if you're willing to stay on after we officially shut down, that's fine. If you want to hang out. But can you speak to, you have some upcoming sessions. You want to kind of give an overview of what's going to be covered in the months to come?
Okay, okay, sure, absolutely. So in my next presentation, so this is part of a series called Elevate Your Brand. It's part of a series that stretches out all the way to September. So we would have like a new event, like maybe like every couple weeks. So like in my next presentation, I'll be talking about aligning your branding with your marketing. Because a lot of people, they don't understand like the difference between branding and marketing and how they're both related. So through that presentation, you would gain a better understanding of how can you really align your branding and your marketing so that way you can drive bigger results in your marketing efforts. Because a lot of times, one mistake that a lot of people make is that they jump right into marketing, but they're not really considering how the brand is being communicated and expressed through their marketing. So that's the real magic, right? That really helps you to drive results, is having that strong sense of brand. So in my third session in August the 10th, I'll be talking about aligning your branding with your sales. So in that presentation, we'll be taking a peek inside the customer's mind in more detail to really understand like how do people think and how do they choose to buy one brand over another. And like when we're able to gain more clarity on it, we can really improve our approach to sales and marketing. And then in my fourth session, we'll be talking about like uncovering your brand's uniqueness. So branding is all about differentiation, right? So why do they choose one brand over another? So we'll be talking about like how can we really make our brands really stand out from all the others, right? So you'll probably have like hundreds, if not thousands of competitors who are selling the same thing. So it's really crucial to have a differentiated brand. Then in my fifth session, we'll be talking about building brand trust and credibility. So how can you really build a brand that people trust and they perceive as more credible? And then in my final presentation on September 21st, we'll be talking about achieving brand clarity. So just gaining more clarity on your brand before you begin your marketing.
Thank you. And looking forward to the remaining sessions in the series. Again, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you. Hope to see you next in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Hope to see you. And at that, we'll give you the rest of your day back.
Great. Looking forward to it. I hope you all can join us in our next one.
Yeah, definitely will look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank
Lot
you
of
for your
great
time with this
insights.
one. Thank you.